we are I'd say one kind of full chapter plus into the time skip, because the first chapter you can kind of count that it's like, yeah, now we are, we have our foot stepped into, the events 3 years later, and there's a lot of weird alterations. One, I'm not a huge fan on Jin's long hair. I thought his hairstyle already was really cool. I really liked the kind of like short hair, but he had that long, I don't even know what I would call that style, that that long tuffet of hair that kind of just like came down over his eye. I thought that just looked really cool. It might be one of those things that it just looks better in the overdried form, maybe, but I mean, like, he could have just had his hair grow in it. I don't really know. I don't dislike the design, I just prefer the shorter hair, whereas, like, I wish he did longer hair on Shiki, or just did longer hair in its overdrive. Either way, not important, it's just something that I wanted to bring up, just because I like the short-haired one, but, his long-haired one, I'm sure will be pretty cool. Maybe it's going to be used more for, like, like, wind scenes where it's, like, flowing behind him and stuff. Could end up cooler. Maybe it's just, like, the panels that were, set up in this one. Maybe, like, they'll look better later on. But, essentially, like, there's just, like, a kind of calmingness of this chapter. Like, there's obviously stuff that went down, before the time skip, everything with Witch and whatnot, stuff in the Aoi Cosmos and everything. The thing, though, that I find weird in this time skip is that it happens so abruptly. Like, the length of the time skip was the thing that I thought was the craziest. Like, I figured it'd be like a couple months, but like 3 years is actually really long. I mentioned before, like, in terms of what the main character has experienced from his perspective, it's been about 3 years for Natsu. So, like, throughout the entirety of the story, for the main character to experience around 3 years, and then Shiki to skip 3 years, it's kind of crazy, because he, like, as a character we haven't known as much about, we don't have nearly as much kind of content with, and, like, to have that kind of, that large of a skip, instead of gradual, like, months to year time skip, just to go over such a big step. And as I'm also mentioned, it's not the same as, like, One Piece, when One Piece had the 2-year time skip, because all the characters were separated. So their relationships with each other would be about the same, starting at the point where they reunited, because, they hadn't seen each other in 2 years, and it was more about their personal kind of, like, growth in their abilities and capabilities, and any form of own personal developments they have with, whatever transpired during their time skip. Whereas with Eden Zero, the whole main cast pretty much has been together. So there's a lot of stuff that's, like, obviously went down, and I feel like there's got to be some form of like plot point, like, throughout the years, that, like, something has happened, and maybe some of the characters, like, have some form of beef. I just find it really weird if it's going to be 3 years and there's not some kind of, like, issue that now exists within the Eden Zero crew, that, like, nothing has happened between any of them for 3 years. That to me is kind of like one of the parts that I'd find weirder. I mean, Mishima has definitely spent less time on having the main cast interact and do stuff with each other in Eden Zero compared to his other series, but we'll see. Maybe he's going to do more after the time skip, and it was, now they're going to have been known each other for years, so they should all be way more comfortable with each other. The one thing also I don't want to make it seem like I'm complaining, because, like, there's some stuff that obviously I wasn't the biggest fan of, but it's like, it's not a big enough deal for me to complain. Kind of like, the long hair on Jin. It's like Rebecca jumping up in subscribers all the way up to 3.1 million. One, obviously it's been 3 years, so it's like she could get that big, but it makes complete sense, because she mentions that, like, there's a whole thing between her and Couchpo, and Couchpo, like, gave her advice and helped her. So that makes sense entirely. And that's one of the things I've also mentioned. I keep saying this. Like, I've mentioned it and brought it up in multiple videos. I think what makes sense is more important than, like, a reader's fan hopes. Like, I whatever I'd want, like, oh, I wanted this to happen. Or, well, maybe I wanted Rebecca to not become a big VTuber or a VCuber until the very end. But it's like, that's not a big deal for, like, stuff actually happening in the series. It's not like a big deal for her to get it at one point or the other. It's just like, yeah, at some point I'm expecting her to get this to obtain this rank and title within her her hobby profession, and now she already has it after a time skip. It's like, well, not a big deal because it's not something that was, I would assume most people were kind of like banking off of it and hyping up. But now they're in the Kaede Cosmos. I like the design. I think the checkerboard pattern looks really cool. Just visually, it just looks neat. And there's some stuff, you know, with like Elsie bring up where she used to, this is where she used to be from. Obviously, Homura and stuff as well. And they're just having some like normal kind of like back and forth conversation with Elsie. They're trying to find information. I guess they've been looking for Ziggy. And one thing they've been doing this since the time skip is they've just been going around and pretty much fighting back any planet that Ziggy tries to overtake. The thing I like about that though is that Mishima used the time skip to have it almost like an episodic adventure in between. Like, think about it almost like Power Rangers or something, where it's like it's just a new threat every week, and it's different on a show like that versus like, you know, with Eden Zero, where it's like it would get really repetitive. It's like if they just went to a planet, fought some bad guys from Ziggy, left, and then just did that for 3 years in the time span. But it's like Mishima had put that in a time skip so we can say like, oh, this happened, but we're skipping over. I thought that was actually a really good idea on his part, because again, it's something that I don't think a lot of people would really like. It'd be cool to see, but it's like it would get boring after a while unless like Mishima really like made it really crazy with like battles and villains if he kind of had something like that. But again, I feel like if it was planned for 3 years, a 3-year span of them just kind of fighting one-off bad guys and stuff wouldn't be that hype. Where it's like, whereas now we're coming back and like the Eden Zero crew is all mixed up, or not mixed up, met back up. Actually, I will say I do like Laguna's longer hair. I think the kind of like puffier hairstyle just looks better on him. But for the rest of them, they look mostly the same. I wish Mishima went with Wise's original hairstyle. I like that one more. But I'm just talking about hairstyles at this point. But then we're just seeing, like, again, more of like the cast. We're getting more of like the characters and what's going on. There's even a moment with Homura and Creed. With Witch, like, I've had my opinions on Witch, but I understand why she would have more of a lasting effect, because she did know them. Like, even if it wasn't that long, she obviously was something that were, you know, was a friend to the entire main cast. But with Homura and Creed, I can understand why she might have some form of just kind of like hanging feelings on it. But it's like she met Creed for all of 5 minutes, and at one point he tried to arrest her and almost got her stepped on. So like, I don't know, I feel like I'd be kind of like indifferent about like Creed, but maybe that's just Homura and like how Homura feels. But at near the end of the chapter, we did get some nice moment with like Shiki looking onto the throne where Witch was from like the very start. Again, like the stuff with Witch, I'm just kind of like, I'm not too moved about it. What I did like is that when Shiki was like doing his whole resolve thing about beating Ziggy and stuff, he had like this marker show up on his face. I thought it was something with his ether gear, but it's like a communication thing that they put in there. I actually like that, because it means like it's just something that the whole cast can have. And with, again, sci-fi, it just seems like something easier and better to do for like a standard kind of like built-in thing to their abilities for Eden Zero, where it's like, you know, telepathy in Fairy Tail is like, it's like a dime a dozen. It's like one of the most basic magics is like regular telepathy. And I don't think Rave Master had anything like that, but I like Eden Zero's setup just because it's like, it's super subtle, but it's really neat and how it can just work, because obviously sci-fi and, you know, whatever crazy tech they have. But at the end of the chapter, they find Captain Connor, but it's like he doesn't remember them, and it's like he doesn't have the memories of this one. And I'm a little confused, for obvious reasons, because like it's a new world, but I feel like it's only a new world because of the future, whereas like Ziggy should still have Connor as his pilot. So this is a different one, and there's not a lot to go off of. I'm guessing that it's kind of like Star Wars, where they had like all the clones of Jango Fett, and maybe that's how it's going to be with Connor, is they have this ace pilot who people cloned and maybe would like sell or something, like, hey, would you like a super pilot for your crew who knows all these shortcuts and is like, all, you know, best pilot around pretty much. Buy it, you know, you get a clone. It would just make sense to me. Plus, it would make sense for Ziggy, why Ziggy would have him, because Ziggy is he sees everything as like as a machine, as an object, as something he can utilize as a tool. So it'd make more sense as he has this human that is sort of like a tool for his crew instead of it just being some random human that he found. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below. Thumbs up the video, from the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But than that, I appreciate you already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.